Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff podcast. I am Ethan, joined, as always, by Pete. What's up, Pete?
Not much, buddy. How are you? It's been a while.
Ooh, it's been a while, but we are back and with a vengeance because we have something super uber important to discuss today.
That's right.
It's been a long time since we've had a proper Hollywood blockbuster. I should say an action blockbuster, right? Not a dramatic like Oppenheimer or Killers of the Flower Moon type blockbuster, but actual action, big screen, IMAX, gotta see it type blockbuster, right?
Yeah, I would agree. And this is definitely the definition of a blockbuster, right?
Dune Part 2. To put it in perspective, you and I were in Dubai in the autumn, was it?
Yeah,
like
November
October
2021.
2021. And since that time, we had the writer's strike / actor's strike. We had calendar year 2022, calendar year 2023. Finally, March 1st, 2024, almost 30 months. Timothée Chalamet was a young man back then. Now he's like middle-aged. And spoiler alert, should we just get it all the way? Spoiler alert. If there is a part 3 and it follows the same timeline, I mean, it would be like 6 years between the start of filming of part 1 and when part 3 premieres, right?
Yeah, so in general, that's not a bad thing because we typically see that kind of turnaround for most movies anyway.
Yeah.
Where things get interesting is that Warner Brothers, I thought, was quite cheeky about the way they did it because they told Denis Villeneuve that we will not greenlight Dune Part 2 unless it does well in the cinemas. And they kind of kneecapped themselves, right? Because you don't release it on streaming as well and then tell people that we'll only make the sequel to an unfinished movie if it does well in the box office. Yeah. But despite that, Dune Part 1 did make a ton of money at the box office. It was not just critically, but commercially very well received. So it was very clear that they were going to go ahead and greenlight it. So I think it was like within a month of the movie coming out, they greenlit the sequel.
Yeah.
And then they did the same thing, or almost the same thing. They still haven't greenlit Part 3. And remember, Denis Villeneuve was very clear from the get-go. He said that he saw this as a 3-part saga, as it were. Even though parts 1 and 2 kind of complete Paul Atreides' storyline on Dune, or at least the first book of the series.
Yeah. I feel like considering how well it's done at the box office, considering how hungry studios are for sequels and trilogies, I would expect that the hard part was getting part 2 to be greenlit. I feel like part 3 is just a formality at this time, right?
I would hope so anyway. I really would hope so. Especially given the star power they introduced in this movie.
And they even say, it's Anya
Taylor-Joy, yeah.
She's already, I think, been kind of like confirmed. Well, I mean, we know that she's the Atreides sister, right?
Yeah,
Unborn,
so she was an uncredited cameo in this movie as an adult through like a flashback or a dream sequence or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, like Anya Taylor-Joy played a very insignificant role that way, but she's clearly keyed up for the sequel, as is Florence Pugh, who played a little bit bigger of a role, but people were surprised to see her, I think.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Of course, the Chani / Zendaya story, that's going to be interesting to see how that evolves or doesn't, as it were.
Love triangle.
Yeah.
As we always do, let's go back to how we approach this movie, because I think that from an anticipation perspective, both you and I were like bouncing to see this, right?
We've been waiting for it for 2 years, literally.
Yeah. We've been waiting for it. I mean, like, I was excited in November when I thought it was going to come out. And then I think in October, maybe they announced it was going to be delayed. And like you and I were just like deflated.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
it was
And it
gutting.
was primarily just because of the writers and actors strike.
Finally got it. I mean, when you walked out of the cinema, what was your impression?
I was blown away. I was so
Yeah.
happy to see that. And I think, story aside, I really think that 100% of the credit goes to Denis Villeneuve. He did something pretty spectacular with a book that many people have said is like virtually impossible to show properly on screen. Like even the original 84 Dune, revolutionary for its time, but like it had its fair share of problems. This
Yeah.
was, I thought he did a superb job.
I agree. I mean, also, and I don't often say this, Hans Zimmer, the
Oh,
music, the score was like fantastic, right?
really good. Like not just good, but like unbelievable.
Yeah. So who do you think was, I mean, we know who the star of the movie was, but who do you think had like an exceptional performance that really carried it?
Tough to say, right? Because so,
Yeah.
first of all, we finally get to see a lot more of Zendaya in this movie. She was
Yeah.
like hardly in it for more than 5 or 10 minutes in the first movie.
Yeah. She's just kind of like crouching around and lurking like in the
Yeah.
first one.
Rebecca Ferguson, she was a bit weird in the first movie. I thought she came off as a lot less weird in this movie.
I mean, she's hot right now, right? I mean, we saw
Oh,
her in
yeah.
Silo on Apple TV Plus. I mean,
I
she's
fell
just
for her
like,
after Silo, exactly.
she's fantastic, right? And
Yeah.
even in this movie, she had so many different looks. Like at one point, she was kind of blonde. At one point, she had dark hair. Then she went with like full face tat. I mean, she played like so many different characters, like just within this one movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, my favorite, let's say, character in this film, probably Javier Bardem.
No way, really?
Yeah, I really liked Stilgar. I thought he was really good. I thought he was equal parts dramatic and funny. Like there were parts where you just saw like there was a lot of good humor that came out of him.
I don't know. I mean, so first of all, Timothée Chalamet, I thought had a great performance. I have to say, like, he's very likable dude, which I never kind of thought I would say like a long time ago, but I felt like he's very likable. It's a little bit hard to see him as like a fighter,
A
just
war
because
general. Yeah.
he's kind of slight, right? I mean, he's not big. Even when they show him with like his shirt off in a few scenes, like he's a slight guy, right? He's pretty narrow. Zendaya was okay, although I didn't really feel like I believed in their romance. Did you?
I don't know about the chemistry, but it felt, I don't know, it felt believable to me because I thought it
Okay.
was done very slowly, which was a good thing.
Yeah. Ferguson, I thought was absolutely solid. I was a little bit surprised to see Josh Brolin come back. When I saw him, I kind of thought that he was like a plant, like when they were going to find like those atomic bombs. I thought it was going to be a trap. I was sure that he was somehow, now coming back to kind of like sell out Paul. I did not believe that he was really genuine. I'm still a little bit surprised and not clear exactly how he showed up again. Are you?
Yeah, so we don't see him die in the first movie.
Yeah.
So here's the problem, I think, is because of this 3-year gap, a lot of
Yeah.
people probably also confuse Josh Brolin with Duncan
Yeah.
Idaho,
What a great name.
Jason Momoa. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, well, I remember him dying. And they're like, yeah, that's right. It was Jason Momoa's character who dies, not Josh Brolin.
Not Gurney. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought Austin Butler was fantastic.
Oh, man, I really
right?
enjoyed his portrayal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Florence Pugh was great. Bautista did Bautista things.
Yeah.
Right. Christopher Walken, fine.
Toned down. Yeah, he
Yeah.
wasn't too much like the stereotypical Christopher Walken talking with his affectation like he normally
Yeah.
does.
Then we get to Javier Bardem as Stilgar. I have to say, I'm not as sold as you are on his role. I felt it was a little bit over the top comedic, and I've seen a few memes online, like where it's like, hey, find a man who looks at you the way that Stilgar looks at Paul, kind of
Right.
like it was a pretty intense like bromance there, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
a
yeah,
little bit over the top where he drank the Kool-Aid, right? And he
yeah,
really thought that Paul was the chosen one.
yeah.
Little bit over the top.
Yeah, but you know what? Say what you will, like that's the kind of thing that I liked about this movie was you had Stilgar, who is like this religious, almost like a zealot, but not quite, but
Yeah.
like this guy who believes in the prophecy so much.
Yeah.
A little bit like Lawrence Fishburne in The Matrix,
Very, very similar.
where he's
Yeah.
willing to die to kind of sacrifice himself, rather, to, ensure that Neo survives. In this case, Paul Atreides survives. And then on the other side, again, like The Matrix, whereas Carrie-Anne Moss's Trinity, you had Zendaya, who
Yeah.
doesn't want to believe in the prophecy. She wants to believe in the man, not the
Yeah.
prophecy. And of course,
Yeah,
he is the
that's
one.
super interesting. That's super interesting how you connected Matrix and Dune. That's really interesting. There is a lot of similarity, although Dune has a lot of religious undertones, right?
Of course, to be fair, so does The Matrix, right? I mean, you literally see him almost looking like Jesus on a cross at the end of the third movie.
Yeah.
So yes, there's certainly a lot of religious undertones in both movies. This one is a lot more transparent about it because that is, the whole point of the Bene Gesserit and Rebecca Ferguson's Reverend Mother, right? Was that they set off this prophecy. It was a fake thing. It was never a real thing that somehow became a real thing.
If The Matrix was known for its action sequences, what do you think is going to be the calling card that like Dune Part 2 is going to be known for?
I think it's going to be the visuals.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's going to be the use of color. I think it's going to be the use of the landscapes and the panoramic visuals. I don't think, say what you will about Denis Villeneuve, like if you look at his last couple of movies, the two Dunes, Blade Runner, Arrival, I mean, I'm going to go out and say it. I think that he is one of the best sci-fi directors of our time, if not of all time. Like he has really put together a phenomenal filmography with these 5 movies that I think would blow people away in terms of sci-fi vision.
Yeah,
right?
Blade
The
Runner,
visual effects
Arrival,
in Blade Runner, the score,
Sicario.
Sicario also very good. And again, what I like about Denis Villeneuve, he is not afraid to take his time. In all of these movies, forget about the runtime, but like he doesn't force the issue ever. And I know one of the criticisms a lot of people are going to have, and I know that I certainly had it, the third act of the second movie feels like it's a bit rushed, right? When they start the war. Like it feels like, oh, that kind of ended super quickly. But then you have to remember that Dune Part 1 and Part 2 are supposed to be seen as one film. So it's like a 6-hour movie, 6.5-hour long movie.
I have to say, I don't think I've seen something so beautiful since George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road, right?
Absolutely.
I thought they were very, very similar in terms of like these oranges, like even when you look at like the cover art of the Dune poster, the first one is very greenish, remember?
Yeah.
Like very kind of like almost a mint color.
Yeah.
The second one is just this incredible orange,
Yeah.
And that made me really remember that Mad Max movie, which I thought was just so visually striking, So
Yeah.
I have to say and that's a movie also, I have to say, or I'm talking about Dune Part 2 here. Apart from the Water of Life, the colors are very, very muted, right? Like you would say that the colors are powerful, but there's not a lot of blue and red and
there's
rainbow.
a lot of earth tones, right? It's a lot of orange sand. It's a lot of desert. Of course, my God, I mean, we've glossed over it, but when we get introduced to Fade Ratha, fight sequence in the middle of that arena where it's all black and white because of the black sun.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was fantastic too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I would say that absolutely the use of color is fantastic, but it's not so much color in the sense of like this vivid Willy Wonka purples and greens all over the place. It's just the muted landscapes and how like striking the cinematography is, right? It's just so, I didn't see it in IMAX. I wish I would have, because I thought that the oranges, the grays, the blacks, and the whites were just so fantastic.
So I saw it twice. I saw once with a normal screen. I saw once with an IMAX screen. The IMAX screen I thought was a superior watch.
Oh, yeah.
I thought the sound was a little better on the normal screen than on the IMAX.
Yeah.
Because it was it was very loud. And especially towards the end of the movie when they're fighting and they're having all these battle sequences, it just became too much. Oh my God. Like the bass was unbelievable when he's finally riding the worm. But man, beyond that, like it was too much.
Yeah. Even the worms, I mean, like the color, they're just so blend in with the sand, right? But the sandstorms, the sand that they kicked up was just like visually, it was really, really an incredible film, I have to say. Do you think it's going to be nominated for some awards in 2024?
So here's the scary part for me, because it's so early in the release schedule. I'm very worried that a lot of the voters are going to forget about Dune Part 2 when it comes out to Oscar voting season in 2025.
Yeah. If you look back, though, because we just did a few weeks ago, remember we did our Oscar previews, right? When you look at Dune Part 2 versus, let's say, Barbie.
Yeah.
Dune Part 2 is like, I feel like superior in every single way, right? It's just like comparing like Super Bowl champions or World Series champions, you know, from year to year. It's hard to do, but I have to say, those two comparably, I feel like Dune is like way better than anything apart from maybe Oppenheimer that we saw in 2023.
Yeah. Objectively speaking, I think had it been released at the original time, I think it would have been, I mean, obviously it's not objective. It's a subjective thing. But I imagine that regardless of the box office success, I imagine it would have been one of the best movies released. And it would have been in contention for a ton of awards. Yeah. Not just at the Oscars, but, you know, at all the different ceremonies that we're going through right now.
What does the rest of 2024 look like? I don't have any visibility on 2024.
Yeah, so 2024 is a bit funny that way.
Yeah.
In terms of visibility, because there was such a knock-on effect of the actor strike and the writer strike. Yeah. A lot of things have kind of not fallen by the wayside, but they kind of have. So this week, Kung Fu Panda 4 came out. That's going to probably be a huge success, even though early reviews are a bit meh about it.
Yeah.
Then you've got Ghostbusters coming out in a couple of weeks.
Not enthusiastic about that.
Godzilla coming out in a couple of weeks in April.
I know you're enthusiastic about that. I'm not enthusiastic about that.
Then we've got a couple of online-only releases like Rebel Moon Part 2, Roadhouse.
Roadhouse is online only? Is that Netflix?
Amazon Prime. So that's one of the reasons Roadhouse, like there's a lot of controversy around that right now.
Oh,
it's because when they made the movie, they promised the director that there would be a cinematic release. And then supposedly the director then went out of his way to say that Amazon reneged on that.
Oof.
And then now, just last week, like the emails are coming out. And apparently Amazon went to the director and to the executive producers and said, if you want a public cinematic release, the budget is going to be $60 million or thereabouts. But if you let us make this an online-only streaming release, we'll give you $85 million. And apparently he agreed to that. And so now they're just like, well, you can't on one hand say that we reneged on the deal when you knowingly chose to take a higher budget and only have it as an online.
All right. Two things to unpack there. Why is the budget higher if they're only doing online? Just because they wanted to kind of force his hand?
No, because you save on the marketing cost. It's so much cheaper. You don't have to go on press junkets around the world. You don't have to do any of that.
Very good point. Thank you for educating us, Pete. Number two, why would you lie about that or say something when you know that's so misrepresentative of what you've agreed, right?
That's the thing is, stupid. Again, all of this is alleged. No one knows the truth per se, but like these are the kinds of things that receipts are kept for, right? I mean, like any person with an email can come out and be like, well, these guys agreed to that. This wasn't something that was agreed on like the back of a cocktail napkin in some CD bar. Like this would have been agreed and set in writing months, maybe even years ago when they agreed to make the movie.
Oh, that's disappointing. I have to say, like, the trailer for Roadhouse looked very much like the Ryan Gosling Fall Guy movie, right? Like very
less comedic,
kind of,
but yes.
Yeah. I felt like there's a lot of similarities, but I guess I'm probably more excited for Roadhouse. Hard to tell.
I don't know. I'm more excited for Fall Guys. Look, I like the original Roadhouse. I don't think they needed to make a remake of it, but fine.
I like the original Fall Guy. I love the original Fall Guy with Lee Majors. I mean, that was such a powerful show from my youth, but
yeah.
I felt like a remake was great, but I wish they would have made it like a little bit more
serious,
gritty. Like, that seems
comedic.
like it would have been that seems like it would have been a good, this is not right, but a George Clooney, Brad Pitt type of buddy movie, you know, where you get those two back as, I can't remember what the Fall Guy's real name was, and his sidekick was Howie. Like, it seems like it would have been good for those two to do something, you know, but I'm not. Maybe when I see it, I will change my tune, but I did not immediately gravitate towards Ryan Gosling, who I do love, but not necessarily in that role.
So the reason I like this, at least on paper, is because I think it'll be a return to the action comedy genre that's kind of been sorely lacking. Comedy in general, I think a lot fewer have come out over the last 5-10 years. But that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. And so I think that this could be a return to form. We were talking about it offline. Ricky Stenicki just came out on Amazon as well. And I like those, even if they're not good movies that are, like high art or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
They're great, short, quick movies that you can kind of watch, very lighthearted, generally speaking, very low budget, relatively speaking. So you can make a ton of these movies. Like you could probably make, I'm not going to say that about Fall Guy because it's, A-list cast and it looks like a high budget movie. But in general, like one of these quote unquote low budget action comedies or just regular comedies, you could probably make like 3 of them for the budget of like one blockbuster.
You know what's interesting to me now that you mentioned Ricky Stenicki? John Cena and Dave Bautista both got their basic professional start in wrestling, right?
Yeah,
WWE.
exactly.
For both being big, muscular guys, they've both taken very different paths, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bautista only plays Drax-like characters, right? Where as Drax, he's got a little bit of humor, but it's based on just kind of like being physically imposing and aggressive, right? Kind of like that, what you would expect a big guy to be. Whereas Cena has kind of taken the opposite, and he plays characters smaller than his like stature, right?
The way to look at it is that John Cena's roles are less about size than they are about presence of comedy. It's more about a comedic presence than it is about anything else. And Bautista's roles are almost always physically dominating and physically present roles. Even in Blade Runner, where he was like, I think in it for only like 10 minutes, he plays a large, imposing man or / robot or simulant. Drax is the same thing. Comedic, great. But the whole point is that he's a big, burly guy.
Yeah.
And of course, I think Bautista is also trying his level best to come out as a quote unquote artiste or serious actor.
I mean, I take him very seriously as an actor, right? I mean,
I like Cena more, funnily enough.
I like Cena more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's got a better personality.
Drax is very likable, I have to say. But that's his most likable character is Drax, Arnold Schwarzenegger really invented, I think, this.
Absolutely.
Right?
I 100% agree. He was the guy who revolutionized the idea that a physically gifted man could become a comedic or even
Yeah.
dramatic actor.
Schwarzenegger started, remember, as kind of Conan the Barbarian, where it was just nothing but size, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing, The Rock, and The Rock played on that as well, where it was always like he always played like the Tooth Fairy, and he always played like the same thing where he plays a huge guy who's kind of like, you know, funny or able to like diminish himself, right? Like his best roles, I thought, was like that FBI movie or CIA undercover movie where he had with Kevin Hart, where he's loves unicorns,
Oh,
and he
yeah.
was like, right, like he's best in that and that. And now when you look at like the next generation of those guys, whether it's like Rob Gronkowski or like Travis Kelce or something, like all those guys have like the blueprint to follow, which is the big guy who's kind of like funny and can like diminish himself a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you see some of the like more pretty dudes, not to throw Gosling under the bus because I think he's very likable, but Gosling doesn't ever play a character who like diminishes himself, right? He's never the bumbling guy.
No, but he did as Ken in Barbie.
In Kenya, but like Gray Man, he did not.
No, but he was also in a couple of comedies like with Steve Carell, remember?
But he was a cool guy with 40-Year-Old Virgin,
You're
right?
right. You're right. Not 40-Year-Old Virgin, but yes, you're right. He did play the cool guy who was kind of like the guy who was the this is how
like
you
mentoring,
get women, and
yeah. So anyway, turning back to Dune 2, it seems like there's going to be a Dune 3.
I certainly hope there is.
So do I. I mean, I really, really got into it. I have to say, like, I think the story is fantastic. The way that they've slowly broadened it is fantastic. There's a very good storyline going forward, right? With the other houses, and they don't explain why. Do we know why from the books, why the other houses don't recognize Atreides?
I don't know because I haven't read the books.
Is it a power play?
I'm not so sure. I don't know what it is. And that's what I'm hoping to get more of this. Try to understand how the politics work, because we don't really understand the politics of this universe in great detail. And I think that's what the next big step will be for the franchise.
Yeah.
Right? We understand that there's the concept of houses. We understand that there's the concept that the Emperor told the Atreides family that they were going to take over, and that the Harkonnens didn't want that to happen, but they had to do that.
Yeah.
And now that Paul has kind of nominated himself as the next emperor because he made the emperor capitulate, I imagine there's going to be a war or some kind of battle to get the other houses to agree.
I have to say, I like the storyline. I like the plot. Like it's not just the interesting thing I read, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but even though this takes place well into the future, that the reason that you don't see more technology is because apparently in the past, there was like a Terminator type event where the machines rose up and the humans had a long war against the machines and put them down. And therefore, humanity is very hesitant to create anything digital. So all of their technology is analog. Technology does not play a big role. No one has guns. Now, why don't they have guns? I also read this as well. Do you know?
No idea.
Apparently, they don't have guns because the guns create a vibration that attracts the worms.
The sandworms. Okay.
Yeah. But you do notice that there's not a lot of high technology in here. It's very medieval. It's very religious based, right? I mean, you saw kind of like in Dune 1, you saw the hunter killer. You see, they're kind of helicopters, which are interesting. You see the big refining machines. You see some spacecraft. But generally, even when they sign things, they still use kind of like the seal, right? The ring emblem.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of, like video calls. You don't see like Star Trek, beam me aboard type stuff or teleporting or things like it seems to be a very analog based society, even though they're well into the future. And I think that's one of the things that makes this such a compelling story, is that you also don't get too sucked into the technology, right? Sometimes you see the technology and the technology is so cool, like, oh, that's how they heal a gun wound, or that's how they, but apart from like the suits there's really not a lot of technology in the movie itself. So I have to say that that's really one of the things that I guess I enjoyed, even though I generally enjoy like new technologies and I enjoy things that like capture my imagination and things that, make me get like super excited about, the future and what are, the new developments. It's also enjoyable to watch a movie just for the plot and for the characters and not get so caught up in the technology and wondering how this came about or what the other applications are or what the other adjacent technologies could be. Here, it's really focused on the story. It's focused on the characters. It's focused on the mythology, which are all really, really cool themes to enjoy. So maybe a little bit like Mad Max as well, which isn't really focused on technology. So where do you think we go from here? I mean, 2 down, a third kind of coming into the future. What was the series that we watched on Apple TV Plus, The Foundation, right? Remember Foundation? This reminds me, from a galactic standpoint, a little bit of Foundation. I felt like the Christopher Walken character was a little bit like Empire.
Yeah, a little bit, right? Where he plays Emperor Day and where he's kind of like the central figure who's trying to consolidate power, or not consolidate, but maintain power.
Yeah. But also, we see a lot of like Star Wars movies where the ruler is in like this ultra modern or like technology setting, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that Foundation kind of peeled that back a little bit, where Empire is often in gardens, right? They're often in places that seem very lush, and aren't really like filled with technology. And when we're first introduced to like Christopher Walken, the same thing. He's not sitting in this like ultra modern, place with like all these knobs and buttons and mainframe computers. He's in a place that very much could be 100 years ago, right?
Right. It's like a patio almost.
Yeah, you see a lot of stone. You see a lot of like.
It harkened almost to The Godfather, where you see Marlon Brando in his like backyard garden tending to like his oranges while he's talking to his daughter in this case, right? It's the same thing.
And I thought that was really interesting how they introduced that. I wasn't ready for that. I was ready for something a little bit more Man in a High Castle like, where he's in this ultra, modern or contemporary type setting, focused on, technology and overseeing the universe, rather than, sitting in his garden, kind of pruning his trees, worrying about, his fruit and his vegetation and things like that. Walken was an interesting character. I mean, I think he played that fine. Walken's one of those characters as well, where it's hard to not see Christopher Walken. Right?
Yeah. For a role that was relatively low key, I thought they cast a relatively high key character or actor rather. Guess how much this movie cost?
$200 million.
$190 million without advertising.
I mean, that is, I want to say that's impressive, even though it's a crap load of money. But compared to some of the other things that we've seen recently, that seems like a very measured amount of budget for something that probably spared no expense, right?
So I agree with you, like in the sense that for the output compared to the input, I think of it this way, right? Like when you saw somebody spend, I don't know, $250 million or $400 million on Indiana Jones, you're just like, I don't understand. I just don't understand how you spend $360 million or $390 million, whatever it was, on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Like it didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
In this movie, 190 does seem measured, but then you think about the sets, you think about the designs, everything was kind of low key. You're in a desert. You're in like a castle that doesn't really look like a castle. You're not in a very high-tech space. Very few visual effects per se, right? Like you saw one spaceship, maybe two spaceships. You saw some sandstorms,
Yeah.
sure, but do you kind of get what I'm saying?
I agree. You're saying, look, that's a great budget for a fantastic movie, but you're saying if you kind of look at the movie, there weren't a lot of bells and whistles.
Yeah.
So what would they have
The
actually?
actors, I can believe
Yeah,
that, right? Because the cast
yeah,
was A plus. So I can
yeah.
kind of believe if you tell me, hey, you know what, Pete, we spent $190 million. Really, though, only $100 million went into making the movie, 90 million went into paying the actors. Okay, I can maybe believe it.
I mean, but if I look at Dial of Destiny, which I think is for you and me the example of grotesque overspending,
Excess, yeah.
I'll stipulate that there was a train scene that probably had a lot of CGI.
Yeah.
I will stipulate that there was some de-aging. But what else in Dial of Destiny was like they filmed in New York, maybe? Like
Even if they
what?
filmed, come on, even if they filmed on location in Morocco or Egypt or wherever they were, you're
I
telling
mean,
me that cost $400 million?
no. Like I can't believe that. Where did they go? I think they were in Morocco, right?
I think it was Tangiers.
Where they
Yeah.
had right where they had kind of that car chase scene.
Yeah.
I would imagine that they didn't actually like rent the city and be like, "Hey, we'll give you 50 million to shut down the city for
Yeah.
3 days and film this car chase scene." That could be done kind of anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
maybe the fees are 10 million. I'm just guessing what it
Yeah.
is, but I don't think anyone pays 50 million to like a municipality to say, "Hey, can we use your streets for like a couple days?"
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. I still think that Indiana Jones dramatically bloated budget. Even kind of like I agree Fast X has a lot of action sequences, but again, like dude, $100 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy to have an extra 100 million, right? I mean,
I think that's the problem with Hollywood's today.
yeah,
And last summer was really the reckoning that a lot of
yeah,
studios faced is
yeah,
people have slowly forgotten how much $100 million actually is to make a movie,
yeah,
right? And forget about making a movie. How much $100 million is, period.
yeah,
That is a lot of money to spend on 45 days or 50 days or even 100 days of making a movie.
yeah.
That's a
I
ton
agree.
of money. And it's hard to justify that, especially last summer when hardly any of those movies made any money, relatively speaking.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that's a good trend. I mean, it's not that I want cheaper, crappier movies, but I want there to be a little bit more accountability. And I don't want to see another $500 million Dial of Destiny. That was a terrible movie from the get-go. I want to see more measured 100 million, 150 million, very, very excellent works.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think of it this way, right? You could get 2 Dune movies for 1 Dial of Destiny.
I mean, that's it. I don't know who's accountable for Dial of Destiny, but you'd almost have to like call that person in and be like, who approved this? And why did you think that that's okay? And if they're so over budget, at what point do you just cut them off and say, we're just not going to make the movie?
Yeah.
But I'm shocked. I really can't. Maybe it's because I haven't watched it in a while, but I'm just not really sure what was so expensive in that bloody movie.
I'm 100% with you.
Because the original Indiana Jones, if you think about the originals were always filmed in a jungle, in like a cave. Like they were never in like the middle of a city in big like locations, right? They were always, he was an explorer. He was an adventurer, right? They were in like airfields. They were in like, you know, these kind of like makeshift military camps or something,
yeah.
right? They were never expensive.
Archaeological dig site in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Right. I mean, they were always kind of like inside of something. They were never dramatically expensive. Right. So apart from this train scene, which I think was a lot of CGI. I mean, I don't think they really had the train going, but apart from the de-aging and the CGI, I'm not really sure what in that film was so bloody expensive. Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
Look, let's not drift back into that because it'll just make us angry again. Dune 2 at $190 million plus marketing, I still think is worth it. I also think that as a piece of art, this is probably one of the best I've seen in a long time. Certainly not just for the genre, just in general. And I hope they make a sequel. I know that as of the first weekend, the movie had made something in the region of $200 million worldwide. That's a good trend in the first weekend if you can do that.
So this started as Dune 2, but as always, it leads to a classic patent pending films and stuff.
Tangent as usual.
But properly so. So let's turn it back a little bit and finish up strong. What else is in 2024? I'm just totally at a loss in terms of what other movies. I know that we've got Ghostbusters. I know we've got Kong, Godzilla.
Twisters, Furiosa.
Oh, yeah.
The next installment of the Planet of the Apes movie.
No.
Bad Boys 4.
No.
Kevin Costner's Horizon, an American Saga. Deadpool 3.
Civil War. Did you see the trailers for Civil War?
I did not because I feel like it's going to be a little too close to home.
Yeah.
You've got Borderlands, the movie. Craven the Hunter, which I think is going to be just as bad as Madam Web. Another Transformers movie. Another Joker movie. Another Venom movie. Another Gladiator. Sonic. Beverly Hills Cop.
I have to say, I'm not that unexcited for a new Gladiator 2.
I don't know anything about it, to be honest, so I'm going to
hold
off on it.
I saw a trailer for Gladiator 2, and apparently it's his son, right? Maximus is dead, and it was apparently his son who now seeks revenge on everybody. But as of now, we're at the beginning of March. There's nothing like must-see on the horizon for the next couple of weeks, right?
Yes. At least in general. There is for me for Godzilla x Kong, but that's about it.
That's you.
I'll take one for the team. I'll watch it for the both of us.
I mean, I saw the trailer for Godzilla Kong. Is the storyline something along the lines of there's a new thing that somehow emerges from the core of the earth, and it's so big that Kong and Godzilla have to team up and battle it together, right?
I mean, yes. That's pretty much exactly
right? So, just like with everything, the former nemesises have to now be friends and work together. And
yeah, they're kind of like frenemies.
Yeah, they're kind of frenemies. Pete, we have anything else to add, or does that conclude our review of Dune 2 and other miscellaneous topics?
That's it. We didn't really talk about it, but what's your score? Where do you rank this?
Oh, that's the most important part. I have to say, this is undoubtedly a must-see in cinemas. I think there's no question. This is, there's some movies where we've said, look, the movie's a little bit flawed, but you still have to see it on the big screen for this reason or this element. This one is a no-brainer. The story is great. The cast is great. The music is great. The visuals are great. If you're not going to see this in a cinema, there's probably nothing that you really would be happy seeing in a cinema. I think this ticks all the boxes.
I think that's absolutely right. I think this is 100% a movie to be watched in the cinema. Action is great. The drama is great. The acting is fantastic. The visual effects are even better than all of the above. It's just unbelievable. And this is, I would say, the best example of why you should be watching movies in the theater overall. And, I'm glad this was the first movie that we watched together in 2024. We started off with a bang. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. Okay, Pete. That is it for us at Films and Stuff. Dune 2, we both give it a must-see in cinemas.
100%. But in the meantime, if you guys have a different opinion or a confirmatory opinion, please reach out. Let us know. You can leave a comment below. You can tweet at us at FNS Podcast. You can email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Reach out. Let us know what you think. Why is this the greatest sci-fi movie you've ever seen? Why is it not the greatest sci-fi movie you've ever seen? Are you looking towards seeing Dune Part 3?
I am.
I am as well.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Pete, thank you as always.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.